we have so many people are worried about AI replacing us. I don't think that's going to happen at all. It's helping us. Maybe having something around AI, and not saying so you have to have something around the hot topic, but something that will speak to the client's pains and concerns and worries in that day and time. I think that helps you compound and grow.
Welcome back to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. Today, Jessica Morgan, our Chief Operating Officer, and I discuss one of the biggest problems we see today. People are doing a lot of interviews, but they're getting very little results. They show up, they talk, the episode goes live, and then nothing happens. No promotion, no follow-up, no repurposing, no strategy, and no results. We call this podcast tourism. And it's not a marketing strategy, it's a hobby, it's an activity. Because a podcast interview should not be treated like a one-time conversation. It should be treated like an asset. Done well, it builds trust, authority, relationships, content, referrals, and ultimately business results. Done poorly, well, it can actually hurt your brand. In this episode, we talk about how to stop being a lazy guest and start being a strategic thought leader. You'll hear how to prepare for the interview, promote it after it goes live, repurpose it into content, and use every interview to build momentum instead of just checking another box. Because the goal is not more interviews. The goal is more results from every interview. Jessica, we talk a lot about this, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, the big problem, right? We hear this from prospects that come to us, and there's lots of interviews, right? But there's little results. There's frustration. And then I've heard people refer to it as podcast tourism or the lazy guest syndrome, right? Can you unpack that and actually explain what that means and what's causing the problem?
Absolutely. So what I would say is what we call here, it's podcast guessing instead of podcast guesting, but also just being on the podcast, having zero strategy around it. And then as soon as it airs, you do nothing with it. We've had so many guests tell us like, yeah, I've been kind of lazy with that, or I've been kind of lazy with doing anything with it. Here at Interview Valet, we want to think of it as an asset. I've talked to more and more people who are like, yes, that's exactly what I think of it. The same way, that interview, it's an asset. However, what's the strategy behind it? If you don't have a clear plan of attack to treat it as an asset, it becomes lazy guesting or podcast tourism. Nothing's happening around that. And so what I've heard a lot more lately is in this age of AI, people are looking for trust, right? And treating social media as not social media anymore, like LinkedIn is your trust authority. And so what are you doing with your interview to increase and amplify the results and also use, to hire your trust authority? And so I think there's the big kind of unpacking, if you say, is strategy. If you don't have a strategy around what you're doing the second that interview airs, you can do all the preparation. You can have a wonderful interview. But if you do nothing with it, you're not going to get any results from that interview.
And we just came back from that a great event, Drew McClellan at Agency Management Institute. And as we were thinking about this, I was like, there was no speaker up there that I would call a lazy speaker, right? They were amazing. They prepared before. They knew why they were there, what they were talking about, right? Granted, they prepared their slides. One of the best ones didn't have any slides, but now as we come back, they're promoting it. They're going to repurpose it, all of that. And I'm thinking they wouldn't come to Denver to speak on a stage without being prepared, right? Just show up, I'll talk, I know my stuff. They wouldn't leave that conference, as soon as they got off the stage and not connect with anyone. That is unfathomable as a in-person guest, right? As an in-person speaker. But I think that's the norm on podcast interviews.
I agree. And it's also, you wouldn't go to an event like that, leave the event, do nothing, and then just expect the next, say it's another large level platform, to just contact you organically. And that's what I think a lot of people do with podcasts. They're like, okay, I'm going to go on all of these podcasts. And then, you know what? Rogan's going to call me. It's going to be wonderful. And it's not, if you're not doing anything to amplify and to really just have, make the most out of those assets, you're not going to be gaining the social media followers and the exposure that you would be if you were doing something with that interview to get you to that next tier of podcasts, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't believe that people understand how much harm they're doing to their brand with this podcast guesting tourism. Um, because once again, let's go back to a physical thing. Um, when you go to a physical event, you usually see the speakers there beforehand. They're talking with people. After they finish their talk, right? They don't just walk off the stage and get on a plane never to be seen again. No, they're interacting with people. They're getting pictures with people. They're answering questions, right? That's where the magic is happening after the conversation, right? They continue the conversation there. The other thing from the harm it's doing to you, think about if you were invited to speak at an event and you came, you weren't prepared, you spoke, then you ghosted the entire audience afterwards, that word would get around, right? That event organizer would tell other ones, or they'd say, "Hey, I saw you had so and so on your stage. What did you think of them?" They're going to tell them, right? And so instead of this one event leading to another, and this upward spiral, you can kill yourself in an industry very, very quickly. And I can think of, one prospect that came to us and they had a great company, right? There's a great product, great message, all the rest of that. And they were frustrated because they had worked with another agency, and I think they had done like 50 interviews in like 3 months or something. It was just obscene, and they were doing the same interview over and over and over. And,
Mm.
as we do, we check with a lot of our hosts to vet potential clients. And I remember reaching out to a couple of hosts and said, "What did you think of them?" And they're like, "I would never have them on again," right? Uh, they showed up, they were late, they were unprepared, they were demanding, and then afterwards, they ghosted me, right? I sent them emails saying their event was live. They didn't even respond to that. They didn't share it. They didn't post it. And we had to tell this person, um, that you have polluted the podcasting cycle so much that no legitimate hosts are gonna have you on, right? In that 90-day blitz that you did more harm than good. And they're like, "Well, that's what my agency told me to do." I'm like, "Yeah, how's that working out for you?" Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And podcasting, as large of a kind of ethos that it is, it's very small. And podcasters talk to each other. They go to the events, they talk to each other. And like you said, that word gets around. And so and the word I keep coming back to is strategy, but you need a partner who has a clear plan of attack of how you get from point A to point Z at the end of the interview. But on top of that, you can have a strategy, but if you're not implementing it, like we sometimes say till we're blue in the face, this is what you need to do to get these results, to make the asset worthwhile. If you're not doing it and you're not doing it, how can you expect results? And so, thankfully, we do have a lot of abilities and services that we can do to implement that for our clients. But it's one of those things where I have time and time again, we have these conversations about, repurpose, get out there and promote, make sure you're connecting and networking with the host. And because a lot of times those like potential leads and all that come from the hosts themselves that will say, "Hey, I have, this person that I think would be great for your company." If you didn't give a good impression right there on the podcast interview, they're not going to refer these people to you because that's their trust that they're giving into you. And so it baffles my mind, and I have such a hard time sometimes because I'm like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but if you're not taking it seriously, and honestly, you're showing up as a lazy guest, if you will. And audience can tell when you're regurgitating information, you have zero passion or emphasis behind it. And so I get some people are like, I might not want to, that might be a bad interview. I might not want to repurpose it and such. We can make, you know, we could shine it into a diamond if we will. But on top of that, though, at least just having some sort of plan of attack afterwards of, okay, the episode goes live. I do this. Like we have a promotional checklist that we'll send out to our clients. Like, hey, it goes live. This is what you do next. Then you do this. Then you do this. Okay, 2 months later, you do this. Like treating it in the long term and thinking about a clear approach to what do I do when the interview or when the episode goes live, because it doesn't end at the interview at all.
You were calling it strategy, and I think sometimes that can be, this big esoteric word, right? It's a recipe, right? It's a recipe that we've refined over a decade, right? We know what works, and some people say, "Well, I don't want to do all that." Okay, you're an adult. You don't have to do anything. But I can tell you that if you make a cake and forget the flour because you don't want to use flour or whatever, don't complain to me when you don't like the results with it, right?
Mhm.
So
It's
if
not
you
gonna
want to
taste
get,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to get the results, then you better follow it, right? There's, in sports and stuff like that, you can come up with your own golf swing. Good luck, right? But you're probably not gonna get the results, right? Go to a coach, go to a pro and says, "This is how you get results with it," right? It's that strategy, it's learning from others.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, yeah, like you mentioned before about the just massive exposure. I feel like so many times people, I, I hate to say it, but it's the agencies that just spray and pray and send out to a million different things. There's zero target. Like you said, it's polluting the whole entire podcast industry that there's no clear strategy, there's no precision, there's no positioning, there's no using the your topics to kind of change up your interviews and treat it like chapters of a book or anything like that. It's just you're not going to gain any real authority by being on 9 million podcasts across multiple industries and doing nothing with it. It needs to be targeted. And like you talk about, it's, the two brothers in the basement doing a podcast, like, that's not where your audience is, and I think about that as well when we talk about knowing where your audience is. That's where I would place the most emphasis on your marketing and on your repurposing, and so we've had people that are like, "I really need to, get more followers on Instagram." Wonderful. What is it that who are you targeting? Well, I'm targeting real estate investors. Why would you put more emphasis into your Instagram then? Because my thought behind that is, our health and wellness clients and the people that are looking to spread the word about maybe microplastics or something like that. Absolutely. That is where your audience is, the setter audience. Instagram is where it's at. If they are the real estate investors or the business leaders or the CEOs, I wouldn't be putting my time and effort into Instagram. I would be putting my time and effort into LinkedIn. And so repurposing, getting those reels, those clips, spreading it, connecting through LinkedIn is where I'd be putting my effort. So it's not just it's like you said, it's the precision, it's the things that we've tested for so many years and we know it's where do you want to show up and where do you want to show up consistently? And consistency is the true key.
You use some words in there like, um, I want, massive exposure and then authority. Well, those 2 aren't always the same, right? There's a lot of people that are known but aren't trusted, right? I always say, if you want massive exposure, you don't need a podcast. Just go streaking, right? That's massive exposure. If you want to be known by everyone, commit a heinous crime, right? You'll make it on every national news. People for decades will know your first, middle, and last name, right? But how's that going to help your business, right? If
Do you
it's
want to be known for?
well, yeah, what do you wanna be known for, right?
Right.
It's gonna hurt your business. Streaking is gonna hurt your credibility in the market, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just exposure, it's not just being known, it's what are you ultimately trying to optimize for? And I think that comes a lot with the preparation that you're talking about before you even think about getting on an interview.
Absolutely. Like before you get on an interview, you need to know who the listeners are so you could speak directly to them and to their pain points and their problems. And so when you're on a podcast and you can directly speak to the pain and the possible like obstacles and roadblocks and such that the listeners are hitting, they're so much more likely to reach out to you. And so positioning it that way, but then also repurposing it with those clips, you're going to reach even more people whose pain is essentially the same. But preparing and knowing who the audience is, knowing what it is that their pain points are, how you can help, knowing about the host, even listening to an episode beforehand so you can kind of refer back to that, it just adds so much more trust and honestly, just being truly genuine on a podcast interview, that right there is going to amplify your know, like, trust. And it's just going to make those clients be like, hey, Tom was such a great guest. He knows exactly what I'm going through. I'm going to reach out to him because I want to see how he can help me in my business. And so I just think it's so important. And it's preparation, repurposing, promoting. It's a lot of the P words that we don't, we recommend in the podcasting cycle, if you will, and it's so often missed by so many people. So
So, but it sounds like a lot of work, right? When people say, well, I just want to get up, show up there and talk, right? So how can you scale that to make it easier to get more results, right? Maybe even how can I get the more results with even less effort? Because that's, we're always trying to get more return on investment. Every person is, right? Of trying to have um, put less in and get more out.
absolutely. You hire an agency like Interview Valet who will do it all for you. Just kidding. Um, no, really, and I get it. I hear so many people say it. It sounds like so much work. And you were talked about Drew McClellan's event, and Lori Hybe did a wonderful presentation about LinkedIn. And I remember she was saying, "I post every single day on LinkedIn," and everyone was like, "That sounds like a lot of work." But the effort she's seen from it, or the results she's seen from it, honestly, I'd put the work in time and time again, and so she showed a really easy she's like, "You know what? Beginning of the year, I break down my quarterly themes. I break down all of this." So, yes, you could say it sounds like a lot of work, but with all the tools that we have with AI and such, it's really not. You could say, all right, I'm going to set a clear plan of attack. I'm going to set, reminders or something like that. And I'm going to say, when the interview goes live, I do these three things. And a lot of those you can set up for reminders or scheduling out the, repurposing and such. Even just mentioning the host. Hey, I had a wonderful after the interview. Tag the host on LinkedIn. I had a wonderful interview with, so and so on this host. I'm looking forward for it to drop. All of that sort of stuff. It's definitely scalable by taking, one interview can or can produce so much content when you think about reels that you could do 5 reels, even more from one interview and spread those out over 6 months if you want to, right? You can do, the repurpose or, excuse me, like quote cards or, any sort of content. You could create blog posts. You could create an email newsletter. Like, there's so much you can create with one interview that you don't have to do more interviews to get more content. You have to do more with the one interview that you have,
And I'm going to
is
push
what I would
back
say.
on that. You don't need to hire Interview Valet for this, right? We're very selective in the clients that we take, but we share openly how we do it, right? My book that I wrote years ago, it's outdated now, but there's been people that have used that and executed on it. There's been agencies that read that book and reached out to me and said, can I use this to build my agency? I think of one guy during COVID in South Africa. And I'm like, yeah, that is not a market we're going after. Please let me know how I can help you down there. So it's really this idea of just make sure whatever you're doing, you get the maximum value out of it, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're doing interviews and you're not getting results, to do another interview is doubling down on a losing hand. So slow down, maybe even stop and figure out what is missing, because if it's not working, doing twice as much will not get you more results, right? And that's when
No.
people say, well, I need bigger interviews. Well, if you're not converting on a small interview, going on a bigger interview is not going to change that. So, and the great part is like you said, today there are so many tools, there's so many resources available there. You don't have to do it all. There's only one thing that the founder, the talent, the spokesperson can't do, and that's outsource the performance, right? Now, people are trying that with AI. It doesn't work, right? People can tell that inauthenticity, right? But you can have people find the podcast for you, right? They're going to have to license a lot of databases. They can do the outreach for you. Please don't let them pitch for you, right? They'll destroy your domain if they do that, right? With spam. You can have people prep you for it, right? That's what PR agencies are known for, right? You can even get feedback afterwards. There's people that can repurpose for you. So don't feel like, well, I don't have the time to do this. Well, you don't have the time not to do this, because if you're going to carve out an hour of your day and not do everything else, don't call it marketing, right? That's a hobby at that point.
Right.
You're just talking for fun.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and there's, you kind of stopped at the feedback area, but I think there's so much, there's more to the circle, if you will, of the promoting, the repurposing, all of that. And like you said, that's even scalable. You can have a VA who puts together, every single time, every single interview, you get this, and this. And then you can schedule it on your social media. Like there's so many ways to make it scalable. And I know you don't have to hire interview valet, completely joking. But it is one of those things where, this we've seen it work where you get, you find the correct audience. But like you said, your why is so much more important. Here we work with missionaries instead of mercenaries, not the people who just want to be on more and more and more and more and more interviews. The people who know what they want to talk about, why they want to talk about it, make sure they know who they want to talk to, and just really bringing that passion behind it and having that clear plan of attack makes all the difference. And that's where we're seeing the results, is when people are doing that prep work beforehand and they're saying, okay, this is everything I have in a nutshell. Help me turn this into a really good strategy. And it's okay. We're doing the outreach. It's the right audience. We're doing the prep work before the interview. You do the interview, and then we're giving you feedback on it, how to improve in the future. Now, okay, it's live. Let's promote it. Let's repurpose it with all of this information. And then, if we need to, let's realign at the top again. Let's just reevaluate all of that. And so it's definitely a scalable strategy if you spend the time in the beginning to make sure that you have the correct plan of attack, the right approach, and you set up a repeatable strategy, because that's what it is repeating. But then um also at Drew McClellan's event was Rashad Tobacco talked, and he said something that was so profound to me. But it was, our phones are constantly re-upping, right? Getting their new operating systems. We're on like 17 right now. When's the last time we've re-upped our mental operating system? But on the same time like that, when's the last time you've updated your marketing strategy? When's the last time you've sat there and reevaluated and said, okay, is this working the way I want it to? No? Well, let's tweak it. Let's go back to the starting point and let's have let's be empowered to do that. Let's not be scared. Let's go back and say, this isn't working. What do we need to do now? And instead of just doing more and hoping that it works. Like you said, let's go back. Let's stop. Let's recalibrate. And then let's start again.
So true. And it's I see people pitch to be on our show, right? And it's
Mhm.
cold pitches. And you look and they'll say, guest one sheet, 2024 is the literal file name on it. And it blows my mind. I'm thinking, you're still talking about the things that you talked about 2 years ago? You haven't updated that? We work
Mhm.
with our clients, to continually update those. You should be always thinking about new things that are timely, but also timeless. So, you need to be updating those continually if you want to be relevant really in the market.
That's the thing. So many people are worried about being irrelevant or replaceable. If you're not updating and rethinking and coming with not even new material, but new ideas and new approaches, you're going to become irrelevant, right? Like, and that's where our world is changing and the business world is changing so fast that you need to be re-upping those topics and those ideas. And it doesn't have to be you need to write a new book every year and promote that. It's just more so coming with a fresh eyes, fresh approach,
Yeah,
which is
and
so important.
it's this exposure continues to compound, right? That it's not that first interview that you're going to be, all your dreams are going to be met. Each one's going to build on itself, or I would also say decay on itself, right?
Yeah.
Inflate, your bank account can compound, but also inflation can compound, right? One is
Hmm.
good, one is painful, right? And so the idea is that if you're always at the cutting edge and talking about new things, it's like, wow, this person is really a thought leader. If I hear someone that is talking about the same things they talked about 10 years ago, if I hear them still talking about, here's the 10 tips to start your first blog, right? In 2026,
Yeah.
their credibility has inflated away or deflated away, I guess, in that. So looking at that of like what you can do, can you speak to that a little bit about that compounding effect of everything you do?
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, building on those interviews and building on, you use them to, like you said, it's evergreen, right? And so you can refer back to those interviews on top of that, but just the compounding of, I think it's also knowing what the audience wants to hear as well and being knowledgeable about what's going on in the industry, right? And so, we have so many people are worried about AI replacing us. I don't think that's going to happen at all. It's helping us. And so, maybe having something around AI, and not saying obviously you have to have something around the hot topic, but something that will speak to the client's pains and concerns and worries in that day and time. I think that helps you compound and grow and all that. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Tom, but just really making sure that you are building upon every interview so that you can still refer back to some things that you were talking about maybe 6 months to a year ago, but it's not the same stuff. And it's something that we're building on and we're growing with. And really, but it's also relevant that people are able to listen to this a year from now and go, okay, maybe it's not blogs, but now we can apply that same strategy to our AI outreach or something like that, right? And so I do not recommend AI outreach, but it's maybe something where it's something that we're using AI for, like creating a skill or our creativity is still so important. That's one thing AI cannot represent or replicate and such or replace. And so making sure that you still have original thoughts and creativity and you're bringing those original thoughts, that's going to help those large language models notice real, true, authentic conversations. And that's what's going to lead to those large language models referring back to stuff that you've said, or when someone does a Google search of, I need the 5 best SEO companies, right? Or something like that. LEO companies. It's pulling all that long form content and recommending your company and such, because that might already be something that you're talking about.
Jessica, what if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, that sounds a little bit like me. Maybe I have been doing podcast tourism. Maybe I have been a lazy guest, right? What would you say to them?
First of all, I don't think there's any guilt or shame in that. I think so many people do that. So I wouldn't dwell on the past. I would look towards what you're going to do in the future, right? And so, okay, you've done those, even if you have done some lazy guesting, if you will, and they've gone active in the last month or something like that. That's not a wasted opportunity. You can still promote those. You can still repurpose those. You can still get that information out there. On top of that, okay, what are you going to do going forward? Is what I would pose to them. Okay, you've been a lazy guest. That's fine. What are we going to do going forward? What is your plan of attack? What is your strategy? I encourage you to sit there and think about it of what do I want to gain from podcasting? Who do I want to reach? And what do I want to say? And so knowing those things, you're able to build a clear plan of attack after every interview. I think some actionable things, if you will, though, is saying, okay, after every interview, when I get that notification that it goes live, I will post on LinkedIn. I will tag the host and take the show. I will create, or I'll have someone on my team or an outsourced agent create 3 reels. Now I'm going to schedule one with some great quotes or sound bites from the interview. I'm going to create 3 posts and I'm going to do one every month from here on out. Then I'm going to also create a blog post with it. I'm going to get the transcript. I'm going to do that. You know what you can also do? You can upload that transcript into I keep saying transcript into any of like Claude or ChatGPT and say, what other content can I create with this? Ask those large language models, like, what are your ideas? And grow from there with that and saying, okay, it recommends I send out, 2 newsletters, one in this month, say right here, and then one 4 months from now. And just really taking that, and you can even ask those large language models, what else can I do with this? And just really creating a repeatable and simple, so it's not overwhelming, process that you can use for every time you have an interview go live is what I would say would be the big thing I would do right now. And we don't need to sleep on the things that we've done, right? Pull some of those old ones, repurpose them, put it as a throwback Thursday, if you will, and just still be getting that content from those interviews.
The whole idea of getting more from the time you've already invested in the interview
Absolutely.
than just doing more interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
What Jessica shared today is such an important reminder. Podcast interviews do not create results by themselves. It's the strategy that creates the results. The execution creates the results. The follow-through creates the results. An interview's not over when you stop the recording. In many ways, that's where the real marketing begins. That's when you thank the host. You share the episode, you repurpose the content, you connect with the audience, and use that conversation to build trust at scale. So here's your action step from today's episode. Look back at your last 3 podcast interviews. Be honest. Did you promote them? Did you tag the host? Did you turn them into social media posts, short clips, emails, blogs, newsletters? Did you use them to start conversation with the people that you want to serve? If not, don't feel guilty. Just don't waste this asset. Go back, pull out the best ideas, and put them to work for you. Remember, podcast interview marketing is not about being everywhere. It's about being in the right places, saying the right things to the right people, and then helping them take that next step. Because this is not magic. It's a proven system. And when you follow that system, every interview can compound your authority, your trust, and your business growth.